I still believe that my wife says the name better than he did, even when she's mad at me, which is like 90% of the time. But you're doing a good job. You're getting there almost. Yeah, good evening, or good morning, good afternoon somewhere. Sorry, I've got this time gap. I should be 2 hours a bit delayed, so forgive me for anything that I'm going to say it. I have to say one story that I was talking with Peter, and he was talking about, he was from London. I was responsible for the project in Smart London. That was 4 years ago or something like that. And in that time, there was a person that worked with me called Froy. Froy was responsible for the Citizens UK. And he has this sentence that sounds like an irony now. He said that if you are not in the table of negotiations, then you are on the menu. And this is very fun coming from someone that's now dealing with Brexit. But I've been managing many times in this table of negotiations about smart cities. And one recurring feeling I always have when I'm in these tables about smart cities is a famous writer that's from the 18th century named Ivan Krylov. And my apologies if there's a Russian guy here. My accent could be very terrible, but at least I teach him how to say my name. Nobody teaches him how to say this Russian name. But Ivan Krylov had a fable about a group of people in a museum that they were flabbergasted with all the smallest details and these great discoveries that they make in the museum. And they make lots of jumping and lots of flabbergasting conclusions about the smallest details. And they always forgot to mention or even to talk about it, the biggest thing in that museum. There was an elephant in the room. And most of the times I do have this feeling that when I'm talking about smart cities, when I'm dealing with smart cities meetings, that everybody forgets that the big elephant in the room. Let me come to the point. Most of the times that we talk about smart cities, people say, yeah, smart cities is about retrofitting, energy. We need to make it more sustainable. Others say it's all about technology, IoT. We need to hyper-connected cities. People say it's all about mobility. We need to rethink mobility, maybe banish the cell phone driven cars inside of the cities. And of course, people say, it's Helsinki. Let's make people happy. Let's just be the best work balance city in the world or work balance country in the world. You don't think I'm very happy, by the way, but I hope it's just me. But when you say this, and that's everybody's defending their own farms, I always say we forget the big elephant in the room. And it's really big. It's 2.57 large elephant. Do you know what this is? According to Grandview Research, there will be a $2.57 trillion market on smart cities by 2025. It's a huge market. And while we are talking about concepts and changes in the cities, what's happening really from this market? Let's just take a deep breath, because this is a very valuable market. And when there is such a big market, companies come in. And that's what we've seen. Startups from Silicon Valley, they invent nice names like sharing economy, but they are just extracting resources and money from the cities to make a business. This is happening with Ubers, this is happening with Airbnb, this is happening even with Google Labs or Sidewalk Labs in Toronto. That was a fantastic lab, but people are claiming because their privacy is at risk. And the same thing we can say about the environment. This is what's happening when we have a market. But for the first time, cities do have a chance. For the first time, there is a chance to act differently. And that's what we need to focus. Smart city doesn't necessarily need to be a new landscape for large corporations. Actually, cities can have at stake on this market. It all depends, and above all, what you want to do with the smart cities and smart cities market. It can be one of the two ways. It's either a market driven by the need and demand, meaning what? Meaning the cities takes the control. The cities drive the market on the best of their local communities, or of course, it can be a solution-driven market where large corporations use the cities to expose, sell, and transact their own products. I always like this movie of Incorporated because still it's a dystopic, but at least if you've seen the series, you understand where I'm trying to get it. I'm from European Union. I work I cooperate with the EIP, which is this branch of innovation partnerships between different units in the European Union. And I work in the EIP for smart cities and communities. The EIP, at the beginning, we just play double. For cities, we create this lighthouse program cities, where we are funding cities with 30 million for free cities to drive some projects. Helsinki is one of them. There is this 6 Haika project. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it again right, but that's also part of the Lighthouse Program cities. We did that. We're trying to incentivize cities to take a lead and to make that part smarter by building their own projects. By the other side, we also created a marketplace. The IP marketplace is actually where all solution providers can register and can deliver solutions. But the fact is, the future depends on where the market evolves. So one way or the other, that's the big battle we have here. And that's still one of the big challenges on smart cities. Who's going to drive this market? I always learn one thing in my life. If you really want to know answers, you need to follow the money. And going back to this analysis from Grandview, this is the market, and this is how it's going to grow. And guess what? The pink part is the fastest growing part in the smart city industry. And that means smart governance. This reveals the big trend. Local governments have not been successfully delivering solutions and have not been successfully dealing with the problems where new big startups and big companies are coming in. And if you look to the investments, that's really strange. Cities and the European Union and all together and everywhere, every government have been investing millions and millions in cities. Then we started making some analysis about what's the real outcome of those investments. And how come these cities are trying to make a thriving local economy or not? And this is strange because from the light of corporations, one of the largest corporations that started up, that most of the new corporations starting and coming to the cities and invading cities, could never happen in the way that cities are preparing. What's happening in cities is that they realized it's no longer the time that you attract a large manufacturing company and then you provide hundreds of jobs and then you will be re-elected. That paradigm, unless if you are in some countries in Asia, doesn't work anymore. So cities realize that you need to build an ecosystem. You need to bring the next Nokia, the next Spotify, and need to breed those kinds of startups. So what they do, they invest millions on incubators and things like that. I started a study inside of European Union where a simple question, if you go to every incubator supported by government or by local government and make a simple scenario, role play, say, guys, I've got this fantastic idea. It's an app that you can call any car around and then it shares me the ride. And I'm going to call it Uber. All cities will reject this simple statement and simple pitch. You know why? Because it goes against the law. and against the local law. Cities will say, no way. We receive money from the taxes, and it's with the money of taxpayers that we implement this incubator and we finance this incubator. So you cannot come here and make a war against those that really feeds the incubator. Doesn't make sense. But suddenly, most of the big companies that are coming around, they are not legal. And they don't care. And they become billions worth it. And still cities keep asking for funding to keep doing more incubators and more things. That's not their core business. If smart cities, or if the cities are the next competitive landscape, then there is only one entity that has the power to regulate this landscape, which is cities. So the future for cities is not try to be an entrepreneur or try to be an incubator or try to be whatever they are not. It's coming back to the basics and focus on policies and regulations. And policies and regulations is what probably will drive a city to be smarter. And that's exactly what, after 7 years of experience in the IP itself decided to create the European network of city policy labs. Basically, a city policy lab is the institution where you can create a new ecosystem, where you can connect the different forces in a city, but in a balanced way, in a protective environment way. Because at the end, a smart city is making a thriving community. And that's a process, not a result. So the policy labs, to keep it very short, is a process where you try to start with first engaging the citizens and engaging your own people towards what should be the changes that they want to see in the city. From there, you move to a civic innovation, where those that are more active, more entrepreneurs, more everything, they just work together, and then they created a self-breeding ecosystem. And that's where you start up in the city. All this process must be regulated. The regulation must join and work on the process, not wait for the results and impacts. It must be something that is called anticipatory regulation. If someone is from IT understands what I mean, because now IT is always about interactions while you're developing some product. You never develop a product from A to Z. You develop like a few months, and then you go back to see how is it working, and then you start changing. This is interactive development called agile development. I'm an IT guy, I have to make this kind of synthesis. But it's the same thing with politics. A proper regulation needs to be constantly interacting with the reality. Not something that you write, you make your lawyers happy, and then you publish, and you expect everybody to follow. A smart city is a process. So it needs to be constantly iterating with that. That's what happens with anticipatory regulation. One of the ways that you have to work with your city to make a thriving community is via test beds and sandboxes. I'll give examples later on. But that's when, if you really have something innovative that probably the law cannot handle, because technology is far ahead for any regulations. There are no regulations for the air, and there are thousands of drones in any shop. There are no regulations for e-scooters in most of European countries, but you can buy it in any shop. The same thing with blockchain, same thing with AI. So technology will always be ahead. But if you want to adopt the good parts of technology, then you need to create a protective environment where you constantly study and evaluate the impact and make one solid package. Because smart cities is not one solution. It's a package where politics, where regulations, where the impact on society and on behaviors is on that package. Otherwise, it didn't work, and that's the assumption we can see it from now. Of course, also something that's very important is it doesn't work the way cities buy. Public tenders for innovation, let's face it, That's why cities cannot create some model that is replicable more than 3 times. And any startup that comes without law, without anything, just multiplies 80 times a year. That's the difference between the purchasing and the innovation, and that's how cities need to start cooperating. And above all, cities must stand as demonstrators for other cities to inspire and to copy. And that's how you get a cohesion on smart cities in Europe. Let me give you 2 examples very fast about some projects of smart cities. One is a nice story. I don't know, when is it Slush in Netherlands? In here? Helsinki? This big event that you have? Is it later on, right? Okay. I was there 3 years ago. It was a fantastic event. That was crazy. Yeah? But the same thing happens in the city of Lisbon. It's larger actually, but Lisbon has this Web Summit. I don't know if anyone heard about it. Web Summit is the largest event in IT in Europe, and one of the largest in Europe. Just to have an idea, about 30,000 VCs from California fly directly to Lisbon for 1 week in November, which is 2 weeks from now. So what happens when you have an event in a city like Lisbon that is like about 10 times the size of Slush? It's a chaos. Let me give you just one example. Last year, there was a big trend on e-scooters. You know these e-scooters that's electric? That all Silicon Valley, there was like 10 brands in 3 months that appear up, all doing e-scooters. And suddenly there's an event in Lisbon where 30,000 of the VCs are flying over. So what do? You just carry as many scooters as you can and drop it in the city because you want to attract investors. So in 2 weeks before the event in Lisbon, there were 7 brands launching e-scooters. By launching is not the right term, it's more dropping. Because there were never an infrastructure there, there was never even a team, there was nothing. They just dropped hundreds of e-scooters in the streets, preferably around this venue, because they wanted to, all the possible investors, when they come in and come out from the venue, they see the scooter and says, Jesus, these guys are so cheap and they are everywhere. For a city, this was completely a chaos. And it's also a very delicate program, because there was e-scooters everywhere. If you try to go in your car, in your own garage, you have like 5 e-scooters in front of that. You have to leave from the car and take it up. You start saying lazy things about the city. There was no way that the city could be prepared for that. And by the way, it's also a very risky program, because you cannot just clean all these scooters and people will say, hey, these guys have the largest summit in the world and they don't support startups. It's always a very dangerous game. So what happened in that part is that after this event, of course, they decided to clean it up. And what they decided, they just look back and says, yeah, there is no law that allows us to have e-scooters, but there's no law that goes against to have e-scooters. So what can we do with that? So they set up a sandbox for e-scooters. One brand fully supported this sandbox. Was also there, by the way, but that was Hive, which is now part of the Daimler and BMW consortium in smart cities. I don't know, they merged. And Hive is part of MyTaxi, which is part of this big giant now on smart cities. That's Daimler-Benz and BMW. And the funny thing is that they started working together on everything. How can we partner with the city to recover the scooters? How can we make dock stations? How can we do every part of the game? The end result was a full package of legislation, a complete change on the application, and because they are a German company, last month, the government in Germany, they were regulating how can we support e-scooters in the city, in the country, because they are forbidden. And this example came as a guideline for German government to start a new process and start intervening. It's a completely different story from the stories you can have on Ubers in most of the cities. And that's exactly where it comes from with the most examples. I also found another company that's called Parkius. It's the Dutch parking system in the Netherlands. The funny part of that, they invented these kind of Google cars, and these cars just pass by in the streets, they recognize all the license plates, they check if license plates have paid parked or if they are legal or not, and if not, they immediately push the fine because there is no paper in the Netherlands. You just put your license plate when you go for the parking, and you can receive the fine by email at your house. So the good part of this called policy enforcement system is exactly the impact on the behaviors in the city. First, the costs. From 600 agents that were walking around in the streets looking for each license, and they have a speed like every person can get like 100 license plates per hour, if this is very fast. You have cars that can get 1,000 license plates per hour. So the costs went down from 600 agents in the streets to 40 people in the streets. Actually, most of these 40 people are not even in the streets. They are in the back office, just receiving the scans. But the behavior change, that's also very important. The parking efficiency in the Netherlands moved from 20% of paid parking to 85%. Everybody's thinking, that's terrible. I mean, you're just exploring people. That's not really true. The biggest difference here is that it is a way of using technology to make the policies efficiently. And that's the way that cities want to drive. If you have a mobility plan, you better have a policy enforcement. Otherwise, all your plans will never happen in the street. And that's exactly what is failing in most of the smart cities. You really have beautiful plans, you make beautiful meetings, but you fail. And you really fail on the execution because you don't have anything to really activate and to make the plans. And then people say people are dumb, people say mayors are dumb, and we are in this game. Truth is, cities can start leading, but that needs to change the way they see politics. Or, of course, because this is smart city buildings, you can also apply for funding, and there is one innovation action for smart buildings in energy going on. Well, thank you very much. And it's always fun coming to this city. And now I always understand why this is the happiest city in the world. Thank you.